Thank you. Being here today is actually an incredible milestone for Shoes of Prey. As Rick touched on, we met each other a long, long time ago. Rick was representing MLC. Bill was with Southern Cross Partners. We had brushed up and done some work and chats with Nikki. And so today, for me, is a real coming of age to be here as Shoes of Prey, into a couple of rounds of funding and standing here as a part of the portfolio that Blackbird have built, and it's such an inspiring thing. So thank you for having me here today. Now, this is a little photo of my dad and I. And my dad, he celebrated 2 years ago working for 50 years for the same company. Does that blow anyone else's mind? 50 years in the same company. For me, I had 3 career changes, had started Shoes of Prey, we were 5 years in, and so you think that my dad and I probably don't have a ton to talk about when it comes to imagining career paths. But for my dad, on his very, very first day of his job, he was given a tie bar, and on that tie bar was a very small pair of shoes. And that was to remind him to always put himself into the customer's shoes. And while we do that very literally at Shoes of Prey, we also offer the opportunity to share what we do with our customers and really be customer-centric in a way that no other company can by collaborating with them on the product that they want. And that's really special, and we'll go into that in some more detail. Now, I appreciate that about 50% of you will know what Shoes of Prey is, and maybe 50% of you won't. Maybe there's more, but as a founder of a business, I feel like you always get so excited when you say, oh, I founded this company, and someone knows what it is. That rush never goes away from me. So at Shoes of Prey, as Rick mentioned earlier, we started in October 2009. To date, we've had more than 6 million pairs of shoes designed. We ship to more than 100 countries every single month. We've raised about 24.6 million US dollars, which I think is about, what's the exchange rate, guys? Somewhere in the 32 million, I think, Australian dollars. We've got amazing investors, including Blackbird, Coastler, Greycroft, and Nordstrom invested in us as well. So it's been a really exciting journey so far. The site itself, in case you haven't heard of us, this is our homepage, and basically this is where you can design your own shoes online. So I'll take you through a really quick demo. So you hit the first page, and this is the heartbeat of what we do. We've built all of our own technology in-house. And what we wanted to do was give you the vision of what it is to be a designer, to understand what you can add pieces to it. You can have a think about the heel shape of your shoe. You can adjust the height of it, color it in with all different kinds of materials, and voila, you have your shoe. The shoes, I'm really proud to say, not only do we make every single shoe ourselves, on-demand manufacturing, so 1 pair at a time at scale. Now, these we've gone from starting at 10 weeks for a delivery time. Now we guarantee 2 weeks delivery time, which is completely phenomenal when you think about the logistics that it takes to receive your order, make that 1 pair of shoes, and then get it back out to you anywhere in the world. It's been a long journey to get to that point, but it's been a really exciting one too. And it all started out with 3 co-founders. So these are my 2 co-founders. They're both named Mike, they're both tall, they both wear glasses, and they're both brunette, kind of confusing. Thank God that Mike Knapp decided to grow a beard so that we can define them. So Mike Knapp, the guy with the beard in this picture, we all started out in law school together. Now Mike took law and IT, and he went on to Google to be a software engineer with them. Michael Fox, on the other side, he studied law and commerce, and he actually went to Supercheap Auto, and he learnt a lot of the operational ways that that company was working. And at that point in time, they were the fastest growing retailer in Australia. So the knowledge he picked up there was amazing, and he then went on to Google into advertising sales. I'll just stop there for a moment because you might notice that I'm Jodie Fox and he's Michael Fox. Did anyone notice that? Okay, so I was in law. I did law and international business, and I went on to be a banking and finance lawyer, and I absolutely hated it. It was killing my soul. I needed something more creative, so I made a list of all the things that would make me happy. And not just in professional life, but things that would really make me happy. And then I started interrogating everybody in my life. What do you do? What's the industry like? What's your day-to-day like? What's your best day? What's your worst day? And I ended up lining all this up against my list and going into advertising for a period of time. And I learned about how to build brands. It was also during that time that I realized I really loved shoes. And I also realized that I wasn't finding what I wanted. And I heard about this guy in Hong Kong who would make shoes for you. So I was doing a trip overseas, and I stopped off. I had a 6-hour stopover. I dashed into the heart of Hong Kong, and I went into this store, and I walked in, and it kind of just looked like a shoe store. And I was a bit disappointed, and I was looking around, and the assistant came up to me, and I said, "Oh, I'd really like to design a pair of shoes." And then out came all of these leather swatches and pencils and paper and all this stuff, and in 1.5 hours, I designed 14 pairs of shoes. It was the best hour and a half of my life. And then a couple of weeks later, these shoes turned up in Australia at my office, and I was unpacking them, and the women in the office were asking me, "Where did this come from? These are so cool." And when I explained, they started saying things like, "Oh, this is so great. I had this pair of shoes that I can't buy anymore. Can you make them for me? Oh, I haven't been able to find anything that really fits me properly. Would you make them for me?" And so I started commissioning these designs for them. At the same time, the two boys were getting very excited about the probability of the success of e-commerce, and we were all just starting to get confident about giving our credit card details online. So they wanted to do something in e-commerce, and it all came together with, why don't we make it design your own shoes online, and Shoes of Prey began. We broke even in 2 months, and we hit multi-million revenue in under 2 years. Now, breaking even in 2 months was very much about the business model that we chose. So if you think about it like this, at that point in time, we were working with suppliers. So we would take your order, we would and you would pay for it in full, then we would commission it with the supplier, then we would send it to you, and then our bill would fall due. So that sort of cash flow was excellent right from the start. We changed that later on because our suppliers simply couldn't keep up to the scale and didn't want to expand their factories into on-demand manufacturing, and then it made sense for us to become manufacturers. But that's not something that we ever dreamed we would do. And in fact, pitching the idea at the very beginning was really tricky. I've told you a lot of glamorous stories, but this is what it actually looked like. This was my 1-bedroom apartment in Surrey Hills, filled up with 8 staff members and about 600 pairs of shoes. And I didn't know this photo was being taken. That's me in the courtyard negotiating the lease on our first office, because as much as I loved my staff, I just wanted them to get the hell out of my apartment. Things were fun. This was our first photo shoot. Little left to be desired. And if you ever feel confused about product photography, frankly, so will we. Isn't that horrific? So I'm going to leave that up there while I speak for a second because it's pretty funny. But there's always a lot to learn. And going into that supplier relationship thing for just a second, it was really tough at the beginning. So any of you who are making a product, I feel you. Those first discussions are really hard. And I remember we turned up to have these chats with people and talk to them about making shoes for Shoes of Prey. And of course, they thought we were completely mad. We would walk into the room and tell them our idea, and then they would say, "How many would you like?" And we were like, "Well, 1 at a time." And they'd be like, "I'm sorry, I thought you said 10,000 at a time." We were like, No, 10,000, but 1 at a time." And it sort of felt like, do you guys know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Great. Okay, so imagine being the first person to pitch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay, so they're going to be 4 guys. Their dad's going to be a rat. They're all going to be named after really famous artists, and they're going to be ninjas. The enemy is going to be a brain in a jar and a guy who wears a lot of metal. I think it's going to fly. And the truth of that is, you just got to believe in what you're doing, and that's really hard to do when you come up against people who have a lot of expertise in one particular area, because sometimes they can have their blinkers on. And this really came to the fore with us when we were speaking to these suppliers, because eventually a couple of them did agree, eventually within 2 weeks, but we badgered them and romanced them, agreed to supply us. But I remember one of them wrote us an email, and she said to us, "Hi, Michael and Jodie. happy with where we've gotten to, with everything we've negotiated. But I felt like we got along well. So I just wanted to let you know that you'll be out of business in 3 months. It was just this moment where all of our hearts fell to the floor, because when I explained about Mike, Michael, and I earlier, what you might have noticed is that Mike had the IT background, Michael had retail and online marketing background, I had brand building and obviously consumer mindset, but none of us knew how to make a pair of shoes. And here was someone who had been in the business of making a pair of shoes for 20 years, saying, just as a favor, I'm telling you it's not going to work. And in that moment, I couldn't have articulated it this succinctly, but in that moment, what we were deciding was, is this person right? Or are they letting their expertise get in the way of a good idea? And making that decision to say it was expertise getting in the way of a good idea took a few things. One was very strong belief in what we were doing and that this is a good idea. Two, a bit of naivety. Making shoes, as I've discovered, is really bloody hard. Oh my God, if I'd known, I think we may have lent a little more her way. And the last one, just a touch of arrogance and determination, just a touch, just enough to say, I'm going to give this a crack. And that's a really big deal, because when we were deciding to do things like go full-time into the business and stop our day jobs, it took the combination of those same three things to take the leap and to decide to fail fast and to know that we had to put everything in to see if we were going to get anything out. So yeah, it's tricky, all of those moments on the journey, but I think we were prepared to fail, and honestly, there have been many moments in the business where we have tripped up, but I think the getting back up part and that persistence is the thing that really gets you there in the end. I wanted to touch a little bit on customization as well, because I think there is sort of a question mark over, is it a monogram? Is it going to stay around? And I would challenge you to say to yourself, how many times have you said in the past 2 weeks, in the past week, have you heard someone say, when they've gone to go and buy something, they didn't have my size? I couldn't find anything I like. Oh my God, I hate shopping. Has anyone heard or said that? Everyone, absolutely. And everyone has said that not because we're being whingers, but because we're looking for something more. Our consumer need has shifted. And this, for us, we believe, comes down to the way things got made. So when we think to ourselves about, for example, way back when my nonna wanted to buy a pair of shoes, she'd go and see a cobbler. And the cobbler would measure her up, she'd pick her material, and it would take weeks for her shoes to get made. And frankly, that's not good enough for Saturday night. So in her mind, nonna was like, you know what? I need to get shoes more quickly. So we started making things en masse, so that today what you can do is you can pop down to the store, pick up a pair of shoes off the shelf, and off you go. But the new problem that we have as consumers is, I wish I could buy exactly what I wanted, but I can only get what's on the shelf if it's available. And that's where mass customization is that solution, to give customers exactly what they want, when they want it, before they know they want it. And when I say before they know I want it, this is taking advantage of data so that we understand and we can predict a little bit about the way you've come to the website, what you're liking, what you're interacting with, what it is that you might like. Of course, this comes with a ton of operational challenges, as I'm sure it does in any business that you might be working in at the moment. For us, it came in every format. So when we started Shoes of Prey in 2009, there were not very many infrastructures or stacks that we could work on that really helped us to build the business. So, we had to educate the entire market, and we're still on that journey of educating the market that you don't have to pick something up off the shelf, that you can just create quickly what you want, and it is convenient, simple, and fun as picking something up off the shelf, except you're guaranteed to get what you're looking for without hunting around everywhere. Figuring out how we were going to accept payments, how we were going to build out the e-commerce side of our site. Every single product has a different price point and is calculated differently and dynamically as you're designing. How are we going to ship everything? We couldn't bulk ship. We needed to drop ship everything one at a time, which we still do today. How do you manage returns on a product that is customized? The list goes on and on and on. But it doesn't have to be, it's not unsolvable. And I still believe that Fundamentally, on-demand manufacturing, customization is the future of retail. And to demonstrate that, I'll show you a little bit about how we're thinking forward on this and where I think it can go as a platform for other businesses. So if you think about something like going to Nordstrom, which for anyone who might not know is like the David Jones of America. You might go there, and for a department store, basically they want to be your one-stop shop for every single product. But what they get constrained by is how much product I can afford to hold on to in the back room. So they're not going to buy every SKU of everything to have available. This can also apply to a lot of other businesses. If you think about fashion businesses, where making things a year in advance, freighting them all over the world, and hoping that people will buy them, that's really tough financially and environmentally as well. So you go to Nordstrom.com, you open up the website, and you're like, you know what, I'm looking for a pair of red Oxfords. You start to drill down, and by the time you have selected red Oxfords, you end up with 4 pairs of shoes, and they're all not all red. Some of them are very expensive, way out of your price range. That's not very many things that you can select from. But something that we can do at Shoes of Prey is that we can show you photorealistic images of shoes that are yet to be made. So we went to the buyers at Nordstrom and said to them, why don't you design the shoes that you wish you could stock? You've got so much data on what people are looking for and what you would like to populate out. Why don't we put those on the site? And so we did. And we built it out, and this is what the page looks like now, with all of these shoes that create, effectively, for this department store, infinite SKUs. There is nothing sitting in the storeroom. There's no risk sitting there. There's no shoes that are going to be discounted, 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 and then God knows what after that. And this is where we start to get to a really interesting model for what the future of fashion and retail can be. And for me, this is the most exciting thing about what we see happening in this space. Customization can exist in many ways. It doesn't just have to be the way that we do it at Shoes of Prey, where we're collaborating with you on a design. It does have to be powered by on-demand manufacturing, though. And that's in any of the models that might exist. So just a very quick touch base on some of the ways that this can exist in other businesses. It can be collaborative, and that's where I sit down with Karl Lagerfeld and we design a dress together for a wedding, amazing, or for an amazing event. Look, that's not really scalable for our kind of business, but for that kind of business it is. It's very high touch. Cosmetic is, here's the standard thing that I'm giving to everybody, but I've put your name on it, and I've made it a little bit personalized for you. Adaptive, which is what we're doing, which is a little bit more scalable, where we have lots of kind of, I hate saying this, but lots of pieces that we know go together, and then it's up to you to take all those pieces and put them together in the way that suits you. In that being said, it's actually fairly unlimited. We have trillions upon trillions of possible shoes that you can design. And then there's transparent, which I find really interesting, and that is, you don't know, but I've made this just for you. And the example that was given in the Harvard Business Review article that this theory came from was of a factory where they were buying soap, and the soap manufacturer walked up and said, "What kind of soap do you want?" And the factory was like, "I want soap that cleans." They were like, "How much do you want?" "As much as we need." So what they started doing was going to the factories, watching the way the soap got used, where it got used within the factory, and then they formulated it to serve those purposes, and the soap just turns up when it's about to run out, and it's like magic for the factory. So it's being transparent. It's in the background, all of the customization is happening, and you're not asking for the work to be done by the customer to achieve that. So there's lots of ways this can apply. I've mentioned a couple of times that financially and sustainably that customization and on-demand manufacturing is really interesting, and I've talked about the back room quite a lot. This to me is my nightmare. And this to me is what the future looks like and becomes really exciting with. And I've talked about this a few times before, so I apologize if you've heard this before, but for me the future of Shoes of Prey is not to be in the format that we are right now. I hope that we go far beyond being a website where you design your own shoes. I imagine a future where we're a little bit like the Minority Report, where you walk into your wardrobe and there is, a hologram or a screen or something in there. And I feel like we're heading in this direction with Amazon developing the in-wardrobe thing. I know it's a bit creepy, but just go with me on this. And I imagine that that's connected to my calendar, and it's connected to the calendars of the people I'm meeting that day, and it's connected to the weather, and it's got my data on there in terms of what I've been wearing, and it says to me, "Good morning," and I'm like, "Good morning." And then it says, so you're speaking at sunrise today. It's going to be cold because, do you know I was going to wear different shoes today? It's cold in Sydney right now. It's going to be cold. It might rain, so don't wear suede. Based on your outfit choices you had previously, I think you're probably going to wear this. Here, I've checked the calendars of all the other people you're seeing today. You're not going to match anyone, so I've selected your outfit based on that too. Based on all of this, I'm suggesting this design of shoe for you. And I say, yep, click. It'll 3D print my wardrobe while I have a shower. I'll come back, put my shoes on, and out I go. So I imagine a future where we take manufacturing even further, not just from factories to hubs, but into your wardrobe and happening in the home. And beyond that, I'm sure there's a lot more again. So that's the future of what we're imagining and the dream that we have. It's not just I think the B2C that we're doing is really exciting, but I think there's possibilities to be a platform, there's possibilities to evolve into something more, so long as we always keep our eye on the customer and thinking about how can this be more simple, convenient, and fun to solve that problem for her. So let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jodie.
Not at all.
Grab
Great.
a seat.
Sure.
Great. All right.
right.
Are we going to fit on here?
I don't know. Let's go up to the top.
All right, we'll go up to the top.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Better.
So, thank you.
Pleasure.
I'm going to start with a question that's about a saying that you like a lot.
Okay.
You use it a lot. It's whatever you're up to in life, do everything before you're ready.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about why that's important to you, what it means, and why it's important to startups.
Okay, it's super important to have a bias to action. And what I found was I started out as a lawyer, and then I went into advertising, and nothing goes out the door until it's perfect, yeah? But in a startup, if you do that, you've lost all of your momentum. So it has to be constantly tested, and you may not be totally happy with something before it goes out, but the feedback that you get on day one is worth more than like the 3, 4, 5 months that you did preparing for it. And also too, the investment of something that doesn't work can't be that big. So I learned that the hard way a few times, to be honest. And I have to keep reminding myself of that every single day as well, which is why I'm so bloody repetitious with it.
You sign off all your blogs with it, don't you?
I do. Yep.
Oh, that's excellent. You worked for big organizations,
Yes.
and then you were suddenly working for a really small organization. Talk to us a little bit about the difference of the dynamic of the team from big organization, lots of structure, I imagine, hierarchy, to 3 founders, in your apartment.
Yeah.
How does it feel? How does it feel that those very first few days when you decide to do something and you actually start doing it?
Intoxicating, overwhelming. I think that, and terrifying, exciting, everything all at once. I think that there's so much safety in a big organization, and there's someone to explain what you need to do next, and in terms of your career progression, and to show you what you need to do in a piece of work, and just that safety net completely evaporates. It's really exciting, but it is also, this is definitely is the highest stress thing that I've ever done in my life. And I think that the ups are amazing, but the downs are really, really horrific. So if you're on that journey and you hit a down, that's pretty normal. And it's especially in the early days really hard because people don't understand your vision yet.
And how do you deal with those downs when you've had a down day?
Yeah.
What's something's gone wrong? What do you do? What's your?
Okay, so this is probably going to sound fairly generic, but actually it's really, really true. I smash out exercise. So weirdly enough, I'm doing CrossFit. And I'd heard so much about CrossFit, like it's a cult, I'm going to turn into a beefcake. But actually, exercise is the only way to get rid of that extra adrenaline. And in addition to that, I try and make myself do new sort of physical exercise. So I'm trying to learn how to surf at the moment. It's more like wobbling around on the board and drinking lots of salt water. But just like trying these new things have been really helpful in terms of getting me out of my head. But yeah, I would just say any founders out there, if you hit it down, that's super normal, and you're not failing. You're actually going through the pits and the highs of what it is. For me, I would always, whenever I'm in a down, one of the things that also helps is this is the price this is the price for building something. This is the price for the ups. And when I think of it that way, I'm like, yep, I would always pay this.
So let's go to another important moment in,
Okay.
the life of Shoes of Prey. You've decided to start the business. You've hacked together the website.
Yes. But
And tell us about that
terrible.
very first sale of a shoe.
Oh
Who
my
bought
God.
it? What did it look like? How did you sell it?
So for the privacy of the customer, I won't say her name, but it was a 25 email chain exchange between my co-founder, Michael Fox, and this woman who was asking us about the website. And she was the first person who wasn't related to us to buy a pair of shoes. And it was so exciting. We were kind of Mike and I were kind of, reading the emails. Say this next. Tell her this. Tell her this. No, that's too much. Too many X's at the end. But yeah, it took, and I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days into starting the site that the sale happened. So that was a pretty special moment.
Oh, that's great.
I should give her a shout out sometime,
You
actually.
should give her a shout
Yeah.
out. And what sort of shoes were they? Can you remember?
They're a pair of heels. Yeah, like pretty simple heels, but yeah, it was cool.
Great. Okay, another thing you did early on that you've spoken about in the past is hiring a PR consultant. And there are, sort of generalizing that a little bit, there are so many advisors and consultants that are around the startup ecosystem and around founders. And it's really difficult, I think, for founders, particularly first-time founders, to work out what's going to be a lot of value and what's not. Maybe you could share a little bit about your experience there and perhaps, some useful people have helped you as well.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, the amount, so we started the company in October 2009, and then November 2009, TechCrunch had the Crunchy Awards, and we were finalists for Best Bootstrapped Startup, which was a massive compliment, but also just sent so many tire kickers our way to try and sell us services and products. And it was really hard to figure out who was real and who wasn't. We have since worked with amazing PR agencies, but the first PR agent we used, we may as well have just lit the $10,000 on fire, and it was like the worst feeling in the world. I'm not sure how to. So, I mean, good investments in terms of suppliers around that time were found through our network of people that we'd worked with and friends. Because they could see how much we were sweating and putting everything into this, and they helped us to sort of navigate where we needed a service and where maybe we didn't. We tried to do things on trial with people before we would engage them in services, but sometimes, frankly, you're just not going to know, and you have to be kind of ready to let go of the cash a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pause there and just remind everyone to ask us some questions. And Oscar's behind the screen there, ready to collate and show them up here. So ask us some questions. Okay, next is, we've talked about the first sale.
Yes.
And now let's talk about selling at scale. You're obviously not going to have 8 emails for every shoe you sell. You tried lots of different things. I seem to remember TV ad.
Yes.
I remember radio here in Sydney. I remember lots of digital marketing, obviously. I remember shoe parties.
Oh,
Love
God,
to hear about shoe parties a little bit. And then physical stores.
Yes.
I know at that time, because we spent a lot of time talking about how to grow the marketing, we were looking for this kind of silver bullet. How did it actually turn out? Was there a silver bullet, and what drives your growth? What really drives growth?
So there is no silver bullet. Isn't that sad? I think, look, I do believe that there are things that bump you in a direction bigger than others, but if you we really had to learn about what was growing our baseline and what was just creating like a promotional peak in the business. And I think that when we saw a promotional peak, we weren't really necessarily discerning it properly from that pure baseline growth, but we got better at measuring those numbers over time and identifying them. Some of the things that worked, so we did, and some of the things that didn't work. So to be honest, our first crack at TV didn't work. And I think the reason for that is that we didn't couch it into an entire campaign. What we really needed to do was, we were looking to build more awareness, and we thought, okay, maybe a broadcast is the biggest way to go and attack that. And it is true, but we should have built an entire campaign with lots of touch points around it and been much more single-minded about what we wanted to say. We were trying to tell people, what it was, how you did it, where to go, what you might design. It was just ridiculous. The second time that we approached TV, we were much more single-minded. design shoes you'll love. And we built around that a radio campaign, a digital campaign, and we focused it geographically as well, and that had so much more success. So there's been a few times in the business where we've looked at a large funnel and gotten tempted by it and jumped in, and then realized later, actually, we should have built a full campaign, gone for a smaller funnel of qualified people. And so we do a lot more of that today in the way we're targeting.
Yep. Shoe parties.
Yes,
Tell us
shoe
about
parties.
shoe parties.
Okay, anyone else love Tupperware? We decided that shoe parties might be a way to go because there was so much education that was needed around designing your own shoes, and it's quite a social thing to do. So we tested shoe parties. Wow, you're really stretching my brain today on that one. That's so long ago.
I remember you hired people. You hired a head of shoes parties.
We did. So we hired some
That's a good
real
title,
title,
right?
yeah. So we hunted down and hired a woman from America, from Stella & Dot, which has a very successful jewelry party model. And she came over and we built a few resources around her to be able to facilitate shoe parties. And they did actually do reasonably well, but in terms of scaling them, that proved really, really challenging. And we had to be really cautious about splitting our focus. And to be really frank, as a company, I think we truly only came out of MVP at the end of 2015. And that might sound like a totally crazy thing to say. So what happened to cause that shift? So end of 2014, Christmas Eve, we opened our own factory. By the time we hit the end of 2015, that was humming. We had a deal with Nordstrom. We had stores put together, and we raised $15.5 million US with Koestler, Greycroft, Nordstrom came on board, Andy Dunn from Bonobos. And it was at that point where finally the strands were coming together. We knew how to make shoes at scale, one at a time. Our technology was a good experience. People were starting to understand design your own shoes. And sort of from there is where we really started to roll together and understand. That then came along with the stores as well. So
yeah. Tell us a bit about the stores, because that was, it was such an exciting moment in the business when you opened the store in David Jones here in Sydney,
totally.
And then the first Nordstrom in Seattle, which I was lucky enough to come along and.
Rick was actually our very first purchase at the store in Seattle.
I was first purchase offline in the US. And then you decided to close them down.
That's true.
And I imagine that was an emotional decision. So give us a little bit of the reason for doing that, and what's next after it.
Totally. So look, David Jones, we opened in January 2013. And the reason that we decided to go for it was we built this hypothesis because women would literally just turn up at our office on Crown Street and be like, oh, I'm here on holidays. I looked up your address. I just wanted to see a pair of shoes. And we started thinking into it and people would email us and chat and call us and say, oh, I just want to know what the shoes look like in real life. And we were like, oh, it doesn't work that way. But when we dug into that, we started to understand, actually, she wants to know how they fit on her feet, touch the leather, see how they go together. She needs a physical presence. And so all of this added up to opening a store. We opened the store in David Jones, and there were two things that were really special about that experience. Three. One, amazing physical presence. Two, the store did double its forecasted revenue in the first 12 months, which was cool. It meant we paid a lot more rent than we should have, but it was good. The other thing was that we built an experience, a true experience. So the store was made out of things that we would make shoes out of. So when you walked in and you sat down, you were sitting on a poof that was made out of a type of leather that we used. It was padded to feel like the inside of the shoe, the same with the table. There were iPads on the table for you to design with, all of the leathers. And then we built these like big sculptures of shoes made of flowers made out of shoes that were like 2 meters high. And then you could try shoes on for sizing and see our latest designs there. So in that store, it became a finalist in the World Retail Awards for the world's best store design of that year. And we were up against Karl Lagerfeld for his concept store in Paris. And some people don't know who that is. He's the guy who leads the design at Chanel. And we were against Puma for their flagship store in Osaka. So the awards ceremony was in Paris. None of us went. We're all home in Australia in bed, different beds. And the phone started flashing at like 3 a.m. And luckily, someone from the from the Australian Retail Association was there to pick up the award for the world's best store design of 2013. So just this, yeah. So it was this. Like, Still gives me goosebumps moment. So we went to Nordstrom because they started as a shoe store, and it's still Nordstrom family owned.
Shoes are down on the ground floor, aren't they? Where
Totally.
cosmetics is in David
Cosmetics,
Jones.
shoes.
Yeah.
Like this is in their blood. Like one of the Nordstrom brothers walked past our store and was like, "Oh, is the toe box on that shoe?" And this is from like 5 meters out. "Is the toe box on that shoe a bit tight on women's feet?" And I was like, "Well, actually, it is." So they're extraordinary. So we pitched the idea to Nordstrom. Hot tip, go and turn up face-to-face for these meetings. We were pitching them for about 18 months. I don't know if you remember, or 12 months, 18 months. And they kept sort of, meh, maybe, maybe, maybe. Then we made up an excuse, and we were just like, "Oh, we're going to be in Seattle. Why don't we come by and say hello?" Complete lie. We were flying to Seattle to get a meeting with them. Lies. Within 4 months of that, we had opened our first store with them. So turn up, it's important. We opened 6 stores across the US, and it was really emotional that in November last year, we wound all of the stores down. October last year, we wound them all down. So the trick here was that it was a test, and it was very important. We are pioneering mass customization. In the early 70s, MIT said mass customization is the future of retail. Shoes of Prey is leading the pack in terms of size of business, funding, and model globally to make that movement happen. And I was talking to, so Daniel Bobroff he was the investment director at ASOS, and he has this great slide that he talks about when you're pioneering a space and you're like the scout running out in front of the army with all the arrows in your bum. And I think in retail, of course, you would try offline because that's how we understand retail at its core. But what we found the flaw in our hypothesis to be is that in 2013, most people were uncomfortable to shop online. It wasn't necessarily a design your own shoe thing, it was a retail thing. And now in 2016, she was so comfortable to go online. So we found that she, as we researched her and kept talking to her, she was definitely online. So we made the choice to wind those back and focus our time in our online space. And it was emotional because it was a very public test to do. So you want all of your tests, especially public ones, to be successful. So, and helping people to understand that closing stores doesn't mean failure. It means that you're making a good decision. So when you see stores closing now, don't make that immediate judgment of, ooh, something's bad. Actually, they're making a good decision.
Yeah, we had a few of the Australian papers say, "Oh, Shoes of Prey, chaos, closing stores." And I think the lesson is that, startups try things. You've got to be bold. And this was trying something on a huge scale.
Totally, it's the whole point. I don't regret it. I do think there's a place for offline retail. I just don't think it's now.
Yeah, and I guess in a way that led to now the Nordstrom Online, which you showed us earlier on, experience, which is a huge, growth engine for the business as well.
Massive. The platform part of it is super exciting, and we switched that on in the middle of the night one week. Didn't tell a soul about it. Just switched it on, and it added like full percentage points to their annual revenue for the site.
Wow. For
their site, not ours. Massive.
Okay, good. We've got some questions. The technology is working. And there's a great first question, which is about manufacturing in China.
Sure.
So I'm going to split this question in 2, actually.
Well, how about 4? There's a lot of questions there.
Okay, I can do it in 4. Okay.
Or 3.
So the first is, you have a difficult business. You've got to build this online e-commerce experience, which is actually where a lot of software businesses just end. That's it. They have an online, you have an online experience. You've got to then actually build the shoes.
I know, what were we thinking?
And there's a long sort of progression, I know, in terms of having an individual supplier, multi-suppliers, and then bringing it all in-house. But the question I want to ask you that I hope one of the audience was getting at here is, how do you even start thinking about manufacturing in China? So I'm a startup. I want to build something. It might be an electronic thing. It might be a shoe. It might be something, other physical thing. How do you even start thinking about China?
So it depends on what you're making. So if you want to make something that's kind of stock standard and you just want to brand it as your own, go into Alibaba. Don't worry about going to China. Order samples. You'll be fine. If you want to kind of understand a little bit more about it and get a bit more specific about how you're going to manufacture and building those relationships, go to the Canton Fair, find those big manufacturing fairs in America and turn up at them and go to all of the stalls and soak up all the knowledge and then figure out who it is that you might want to go deeper on with relationships and manufacturing with them. If you're building something that's never been done before, you're crazy, no joking, then this is when you need to go and build really big relationships with people, and you need to spend a lot of time on the ground. So my China team is about 170 people. The vast majority are our technicians, but we always had kind of at least 10 people. We started with one, obviously, and the second person who came aboard with us in China is still with us today. Actually, from then onwards, pretty much all still with us. But that team has been really critical to us being able to do what we do, really investing in having people on the ground to figure out that process, because frankly, the process doesn't exist. Manufacturers don't know how to do what you need them to do, and you need to understand what they do and then how to hack that with software, process, and just simple common sense to build something new. So that requires a different kind of investment.
And then do you sell your shoes in China? Is the next question.
We do, but we haven't targeted the market there. I think it's a market that is very interesting, but I'm not sure that it would be the next obvious market to go to for us. We need to crack the US first, and we're on our way to doing that, which is really exciting. But there is so much to learn and do in every market you go to. So in Australia, I'd say you can address the market kind of in one mindset. In America, it's actually more like Europe, where every state has a different culture, perspective, way of dressing, and that kind of thing that you need to kind of approach in your marketing. So, we'll spend a bit more time on that. But then organically, in terms of traction we've gotten so far, China is not in our top 5, but we would look at it from an opportunity perspective when we're thinking about the market to go to next.
Look, we're almost out of time, and I have one more question I want to ask you. I'm going to press the button here and hope it changes to a great picture. We're going to wait for it. Here it is. Here it is.
Oh.
And, so quite famously, you ran from Bondi Beach to Bronte Beach in a pair of 4.5-inch stilettos.
I did.
Which we can see you putting on there next to your joggers.
Yep.
And at the end of the video, you have a big smile on your face.
True.
But tell us the real story. What is it really like running from Bondi to Bronte in a pair of 4.5-inch heels?
So hilariously, the people that filmed this for me didn't think I was actually going to do it. They turned up with the camera and this sort of stuff, and they thought that we were going to fake it and do a shot here and a shot there. And I started running, and they were like, "Oh shit!" Started coming with me. Look, I hate running, truly hate running. But I've got to say, I wish that I had have taken the shoes off and shown my feet at the end, because there were no blisters. The one thing is, any woman would know this, it's not really great for your back to run in a pair of heels. But this video, the proof of it was people kept asking, are your shoes comfortable? And look, I can pull the pair of shoes apart and show you the construction and all that kind of stuff, or I could put my money where my mouth is, and that was what this video was.
Well, Jodie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's been
Pleasure.
Wonderful. It's a real honor for me and for Blackbird that we've seen the business thrive. And so thank you very much for coming and sharing the story.
Thank you for believing in us.